Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Nice to have a good crowd. My name is Claude Werner. People call me the Tactical Professor. I write a blog, and its frequency, frankly, varies from once a month to once a day. And tacticalprofessor.com is the blog address. What I'm going to do is try to present in a couple hours a 10,000-foot overview of, if you will, the whole personal protection process. A lot of what we focus on are the details of the process, shooting, fighting, so forth and so on, but we don't frequently give people an overview of what it's all about and what the goals are in the end. And that's what I wanted to do with this presentation. So there's a few definitions I'd like to use, and I want to make sure that everybody understands what I mean by them, because as I've been discussing with some of my friends recently, words have meaning. Strategy is deciding the things that are in our best interest. And strategy is something you do ahead of time. And you think about, well, what are my goals? What are my objectives in life and in the process? Go back. As opposed to tactics, where we think about how do we do those things right. Tactics are something that I could look at something someone does on a video. Let's say like John Correa, who does his 15 million, gunfights thing. And we can look at that and we can say, well, that guy's tactics were either good or not so good. Strategy, on the other hand, is a little harder to find, because how do we know what that person's goals were? We don't always know that. And my goals might be very different than someone else's goals. I was just talking with Caleb about my recent trip from the SHOT Show, where I unfortunately got stranded at the SHOT Show in Las Vegas with no transportation back to Atlanta. I had gone out with a friend who's an international arms distributor, and his Singapore agent died while he was there. And so the poor guy's wife has to get the stiff back to Singapore, and she doesn't speak English. So my friend had to help her get the body back, and I'm there in Las Vegas, and I got no way to get back because we had driven out. So I had to think about, well, what's my objective? And that was to get back without incurring any problems along the way, and I ended up taking a Greyhound bus. So I'm in the downtown Dallas area, and the culinary highlight of spending 2.5 days on the bus was 2 meals at McDonald's. The food was largely inedible. So as I'm in the downtown Dallas terminal, I spy a McDonald's across the street. Like, ooh, I could actually have an edible meal. I'm not even sure I'll say decent, but it would be edible. So as I'm walking out, there's some tweaker on the corner, and he collapses. And I just went right by him. I said, dude, you're on your own. I'm hungry. I'm going to McDonald's. Now, a nicer person might have called the police. That was not part of my strategy. My strategy was, I want something to eat. This guy's a tweaker, and I don't care. But there are no doubt people in this crowd who are nice people. Most of you are nice people. I will not say 100%, but most of you are nice people who might help the guy. But I'm not that. So my strategy was different. My strategy was, stomach empty. So tactics we can analyze more easily in the context of the situation, but the strategy becomes harder because it's personalized. And then options. The tools and skills and procedures that we use to try to accomplish our ends, our end goals. Now, when I first started really seriously studying this about 30 years ago, we basically had one option, a gun. And that's why if you look at most of the books that are written and DVDs that are made about self-defense, and I'll talk about that in a minute, they're about using guns. But the fact of the matter is, a gun is a very special purpose tool that is only useful in a minuscule number of incidents. Most of the time we're going to use other tools and procedures, some of which are as simple as going, no. I want everybody to do that. You cannot escape any training from me without having some kind of hands-on or active thing. So I want everybody to stick your hand up like this.
No.
No. Go away.
Go away.
Okay, so you've actually had some training here as opposed to listening to me talk. But then there's other tools, We have, I constantly carry a noxious chemical with me, pepper spray. And my story about pepper spray is that I've been carrying it for many years, and I used to work for a big accounting firm in downtown Atlanta. So, really nice day, I wanted to go and have lunch, and I was just going to go to a sandwich shop right across the street and get a sandwich and come back to my office. Yeah, it's a nice day out. I'm not going to wear my suit. So I didn't take any of my tools or anything with me. I just walked out, didn't even have my coat on. And there on the corner of Peachtree and Ellis is some no good choking his chicken. Right on the corner, And here's the weird thing. There's a bunch of women standing around him looking on him in horror. Like, well, if you're horrified by this, why are you looking at them? But they were. And it's amazing how quickly the human mind works. Because within 2 steps of seeing the guy, I was thinking, and at the time I was carrying pepper foam. That was, the cool stuff then. But I was thinking, if I had my pepper foam with me, I could just walk by him, spray his wanker, throw it in that garbage I picked out, throw it in that garbage can, walk around the block, go up to the cafeteria in my building, and laugh about that incident in my mind every day for the rest of my life. However, I didn't have my tools with me, so now it's one of the 5 regrets of my life, and it's right up there with the Belgian supermodel who wanted me to sleep with her, and I was too stupid to realize it. So, we have these tools now that can help us that we didn't have years ago. And that's why
David Yamani
uses this term gun culture 2.0, and I'm very glad that in that culture you have more tools available to you than we used to have, because all we had was guns. What am I going to do? Shoot some guy because he's
sexually gratifying himself
on the corner of Peachtree and Ellis? No, I can't do that. But, no cop would ever say anything about me just letting him have it and letting him rub it in for a second. Here's some lube for you, dude. So that's one of our options. And learning to verbalize is another one of our procedures that we can use. You'd be surprised at how many times, I used to have to, once again, because I worked downtown Atlanta, there was this gauntlet of bums, and I called it bum bushes, that they would set up as I walked from the train station to my building. And, people would actually speak with them. Like, why would you speak with them? All I had to do was hold my hand out like that. And the bums knew, look, this guy is not going to give me any money, so I'm not going to waste my time on him, because they're using their time efficiently. They've read that book. Alan Lakin's thing about how to get control of your time in your life. They know those time management techniques. If some guy is doing like this, they know he's not going to give him a quarter, as opposed to some nice person that says, "Oh, can I help you?" No.
Get out of here, pal.
No, I don't want you. So we have these procedures that we can use. And this is a definition that I think is very important. I never say self-defense. I say personal protection. Because the person you're protecting, in many cases, is not yourself. And that's something we need to get into our heads. And there's a scope to that. How many of you have children or grandchildren? Yeah, a lot of folks. How many of you take some measure when your children or grandchildren are in the house to keep them from getting access to your guns? Yeah. Well, you know what? You're protecting them from shooting themselves. Because some of you know that I started a project several years ago that I called, it started out as bad shootings and it has morphed into negative outcomes. One of the things that I gather information on is how many children shoot themselves with an adult's gun. It's every day. Shoot themselves. Now, how many actually get access to the gun without shooting themselves and come close to it, I have no way of knowing, because those don't show up in the news reports. But every day, statistically, a child shoots themselves with one of their some adult's gun. Here's the unfortunate thing about it is a 2-year-old can run any double-action gun. People think, oh, I've got a revolver or I've got a double-action autoloader and, my little toddler can't work that. No, you are as wrong as 2 left legs. Because what the kid does is, where do kids at that age spend all their time? On the ground. Well, what they do is they get the gun on the ground, and eventually the gun ends up with the back strap on the ground and the muzzle pointing at the kid's head. And then the kid puts both of its thumbs in on top of the trigger and pushes down with all 14 pounds of its weight. That is more than the trigger of the gun. So the gun goes off, and because the gun is pointed at the kid's head, it blows the kid's head off. Sorry, that's the way it works. So that's why when you hear about these things, when adults shoot themselves, it's very frequently, what we might consider a minor wound. It goes down the leg or in the hand or something like that. When little kids shoot themselves, it's almost always in the upper chest or in the head, and they die. Because first of all, they're small, and second of all, it's in an area where even if you shot an adult, they're going to die. So when you put your guns away and lock them up, you're protecting the kid and the gun, and you're protecting your stupid Uncle Albert, or your drunken brother-in-law. Those are all people you're protecting by doing that, and I think we need to start recognizing that scope is much larger than we think about it in terms of protecting people from violent criminals. Our end goal, our strategy in this, is to make good decisions. That's one of the things that we are still developing as a skill in the training community, is teaching people how to make good decisions. What we want to do as a result of those decisions is have positive outcomes and avoid negative outcomes. How many of you people know who John Farnham is? Okay. John Farnham is one of my mentors in this business, and he has a great saying. What's the best way to win a gunfight? Don't be there. That's a positive outcome. I'm just not here. Whatever that gunfight is, I'm not there. That's what we're trying to achieve, a positive outcome. And we're trying to keep, things like people shooting themselves. Frankly, the negative outcomes categories that I have, there's 11 of them. only one of them has anything to do with marksmanship. The other 10 are all about police encounters, shooting yourself, shooting somebody else that you shouldn't have, etc., etc. So those are the negative outcomes that we need to avoid. And if we think about what they constitute ahead of time, then, as soon as you see any obstacle, it's kind of like if you're walking down the street and you see a pile of dog crap, you right away know, oh, dog crap. There's a joke of KGB guys going down, and they're walking down the street in Moscow, and the one guy says, oh, looks like dog shit. Oh, smell. And the other guy, the junior KGB guy, says, what? Smell. The other guy reaches, bends over and smells it. He says, it smells like dog shit. He says, feel. What? Feel. So the guy reaches down and feels it twice. Feels like dog shit. Taste. What? Taste. Blech. Tastes like shit. Good thing we know step in it. So when you see things and you understand that they're a problem, we naturally have a tendency to avoid them, but we have to recognize what they are. If you didn't know what dog shit was, you'd step in it. You wouldn't think anything of it. The reason we want to make good decisions is because our decisions determine our outcomes. Our decisions, therefore, control our futures in many cases. In some cases, it's minor. But when we're talking about deadly weapons, the decisions we make can determine the course of our lives. Good decisions tend to lead to positive outcomes. Bad decisions tend to lead to negative ones. Good decisions are frequently made ahead of time and then acted on in the moment. What do I mean by that? Anybody have any idea? Well, yeah, training. But pre-planning, exactly. So let's say, for instance, the case of someone who keeps a gun in their store, maybe on their person or maybe behind the cash register, doesn't matter. But they might have decided that if a robbery occurs and the robber runs out the door, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run up to the door and lock it, as opposed to chasing him down the street with my gun in hand. That's a pre-made decision of how I'm going to handle the situation. Now, I will guarantee you that if you ask 100 shopkeepers who have a gun in their store what they would do after the robber leaves, they won't have a plan. Well, by having a plan, then they avoid having that situation of they're running down the street chasing the robber, which, depending on the state you're in, may be legal and may not be. Some states that's a problem. So there are many good decisions we make ahead of time. There are many bad decisions we make ahead of time. For instance, people who say, I'll shoot anyone in my home, that's a bad decision. And it's made ahead of time. So those people that think that way need to rethink that decision. Because what's going to happen is, when you get into a certain set of circumstances, your decision making no longer becomes conscious. It becomes a question of what's been programmed into your mind ahead of time. And you're just going to act on that. I've been caught up in that myself. Fortunately, the outcome was not particularly negative, but it almost cost me a friendship. But it was something that I did that was kind of stupid, because I'd been thinking about it ahead of time, and lo and behold, that's what I did. Even while I was thinking, as I'm walking up to him, this is not a good idea. And I still did it. And I thought later, why did I do that? Well, because I programmed myself to do it. What you need to think about is take charge of the situation. Don't let the situation take control of you. It's real easy for us to become emotionally hijacked by what we're doing. You know, we get caught up in things. When someone threatens you, or your family, or your friends, or even just innocent people that you see, it's real easy to translate your righteous indignation at that act into vengeance. And as soon as you cross that line, you've been emotionally hijacked by that. Pre-planning helps you avoid that from emotional hijacking. So I want you to think about that. Don't let the situation control you. An example of that is Jerome Irving. Anybody know who that was?
Oh, yeah.
Oklahoma City pharmacist. Started out very well. You know, two guys came in to rob him. He shot one of them. Then he got into that thing of chasing. And I assure you that chasing is an instinctive response that you have to program out of yourself. I watched that I was a role player in a force-on-force group for 10 years. And we watched people all the time who, not necessarily chase in the sense of run after, but there's a bonding that takes place between you and the potential victimizer. And people would follow the guy even after he broke off. And they'd say, "No, I didn't do that. You want to see the video?" And they'd all go, "I did. I followed him." And this is like hundreds of incidents. Very rarely did they ever break off. And we'd have to call the end of the scenario to get them to stop chasing the guy. So what happened with Ursland was he chased this guy, and then he came back, and he was so pissed off that somebody tried to rob him that his judge, which actually worked quite well, you know, everybody talks about the judge like it's a piece of shit. Well, he let that guy have it with one round of 000 buckshot, and the guy said, "Oh, I'm feeling pretty bad. I guess I'll fall down now and play dead." Unfortunately, when Earthling came back, then he got out his pocket pistol and pumped 5 rounds into the dude. Consequently, he's in prison for the rest of his life. He got emotionally hijacked by that whole situation. So strategy. We want to define our goals. We want to recognize how to achieve those goals. We want to focus while we're evolving this on what's the desired outcome. Anybody know where that quote comes from? Immature strategy is the cause of grief. Any idea? I'm sorry? Close. Any other ideas? It's from the Book of Five Rings. That's right. By Miyamoto Musashi. Our goals drive our strategy. We set the goals ahead of time. One of the incidents that I had, which was stupid, the guy committed, and what ended up, he was charged and convicted of aggravated assault. Somebody asked him, "Why did you do that?" And he said, "I wanted to be a hero." That was his goal. Well, you know, for 10 seconds, to the person he was saving, he was a hero. To the police and the prosecutor, he was not a hero. He was a felon, and he ended up being a felon. Or playing police officer. You know, I run into a lot of people that don't understand that this little license that we have to carry a gun is not the same as a police officer's badge. Incidentally, this is a technique that Jimmy Cirillo taught me. Everybody seen L.A. Confidential? When he says at the end, hold your badge up so they'll know you're a police officer. This is a posture that criminals do not assume when the police are approaching. Jimmy told him, he said, hey, if you can do it, have your driver's license and your carry permit in a separate card case and hold it up so then they don't shoot you when you come up, because being shot by the police when they respond is a negative outcome. And Jimmy was one of the greatest gunfighters of the 20th century, so his ideas carry a lot of weight to me. Protect yourself. Okay, that's a good goal. Protect your family or friends. That's another good goal. Remain financially solvent. That's another good goal. Avoid going to jail or prison. Really good goal. Does anybody disagree with that? It's a really good goal. There are people you will talk to that you can tell very early in the conversation they're looking to kill someone. That's not a good goal. One of the things that any of us who teach use of force dread in our classes is when somebody says, when can I shoot someone? Because that is not too far from saying, I want to kill someone. They don't really realize it, and it might not have framed it in their mind that way, but that's kind of the way it works. Is when you say, when can I shoot someone? When you shoot someone, you have to assume they'll die. So when can I shoot someone? Then if somebody just said to you without any context, when can I kill someone? You probably figure that person's kind of a whack job. What you? I'm talking with somebody and they say, oh, when can I kill someone? Well, when somebody says, when can I shoot someone, it's not any different of the question. Because guns are deadly. Shoot people. It's kind of a joke that I use on Facebook when somebody posts things. I have friends who are lawyers and they post these scenarios, and in many cases, one shot does the job. A lot of times we hear about handguns are pathetic stoppers and all this and that. Don't count on that. People die from one round from a handgun very, very frequently. Where the idea that handguns are shitty stoppers and people don't die from them is the ones that go to the hospital. Because if you go to the hospital, if they get to the hospital and they're still breathing, there's a very good chance you'll survive. Modern medical science is quite amazing. But the ones that are killed on site never get to the hospital, so they don't get put in those statistics. So that's not a good goal, and it's not a good way of phrasing that. What I would rather people ask me is, how can I avoid shooting someone? Remember, what's the best way to win a gunfight? Don't be there. In my mind, this is just a paradigm that I set up. My priorities are to avoid the criminal in the situation, to escape it. If I have to, I will confront him, meaning a verbal exchange or just, a body language exchange that, hey pal, this is not going the way you want it to. It's not going to end up the way you want it to turn out. Just go away and find another victim. I hate to say that, but I've had incidents where, I just had to say, look, I'm not the right guy. Go find some girl in flip-flops, to victimize. And then if that all doesn't accomplish the mission, then we resist in active combat, whether that's hand-to-gland combat or using our weapons or deadly force or something of that nature. So that's the priorities that I think are best. You can choose whatever you'd like among them. Decide ahead of time, as I mentioned before, that we're going to have pre-incident preparation going on in our head. Even if you have to modify the plan, that's faster than making a plan up on the spot. When people get confused about the OODA loop, which John Boyd actually referred to as OODA, they think that he was saying, think faster. You cannot think faster, from one moment to the next, unless you're on some kind of drugs. Your mind just thinks fast. What John Boyd meant in that was have a series of decisions already pre-made, because then you can pick from them quite quickly. Our tactics are going to imply, in many cases, movement. That may only be movements of your arms. Go, draw the gun, shoot. Stand and deliver. But there are implied tasks that go along with it, such as preparation, awareness of what's going on, the positioning that you use to gain a dominant advantage over a criminal, and then your response based on appropriate options. There are triggers and timing. How many of you know what proxemics are? Well, we got a few people. Proxemics, Proxemics. It's the science of how we use space. Well, typically, unless there's two-way gunfire involved, shooting will occur at less than 12 feet. That's been my analysis of it. So we have to understand how those timings work and make sure that that's how we get inside the OODA loop, if you want to use that terminology, of the criminal, by saying, hey, here's the trigger. How many of you have heard the term line in the sand? Well, that's a trigger. And that's the real meaning of John Boyd's OODA loop. And your timing also relates to your capabilities. Someone like Gabe White, if he needed to, he can make a shot at 25 yards. Probably a headshot. Most of us here cannot do that. So then our timing becomes different, because we have to wait at the point where we can respond in accordance with our own capabilities, which are different than other people's. Once again, we're going to have general decisions made ahead of time, because it's faster to modify a plan than to make one. We have in the Army, we call that immediate action drills, that we just know what we're going to do. Then we're going to respond, and we're going to be prepared to shift, because it's, how many of you have heard the saying, it's not over till the fat lady sings? Well, you know what? The situation is not over until the police are gone, and the prosecutor says, you're okay. That's when the incident ends, which may be weeks or months later. But we think that, okay, we've shot the guy or ran him off or something like that, the incident's over. It's not. It's going to continue, because you're going to have to interact with the authorities. So that's a post-incident reorganization that you're going to have to think about. Things like, what do I say to the police? And there are varying opinions about that, and I'm not going to give you one because there's so many of them. But thinking ahead of time about choosing what you're going to say can be helpful, because your natural tendency is going to be to run your mouth. And the lawyers will tell you, the less that you tell the police, the better off you are. Now, once again, that's a conversation for the lawyers to have with you. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but thinking about whatever that might be ahead of time is a good thing. And our options, think about what your options are. In the old days, we used to talk about the force continuum, and it was like you had all these options, but then you were supposed to do this before you do this, and blah, blah, blah. And we've learned that that's probably not the best way to look at it, but the things that were on that scale are still appropriate. That's things like in the old days, all we had was a gun. Now we've got less lethal force. We can employ noxious chemicals. Verbalize and communicate. No! Everybody do it again.
No!
Go away. Exactly. Thank you. Sometimes even just body language. You know, when you look right at people, you know, and you have to be careful about that because now in some cultures that's a challenge. But at the same time, if you look at somebody and let them know you're there, what they're looking for is someone who's unsuspecting. Well, as soon as you let them know you're there, then the jig is up. It's not unsuspecting anymore. Withdraw or take cover. Sometimes we surrender temporarily to gain the time that we need or the position we need. How many of you have seen Tom Gibbons' DVD that he did with Rob Pincus about the 10 gunfights that his students were in? Well, one of them is the guy got surprised and by two individuals, and they kidnapped him. Well, he had his gun on him, and it was concealed, and they didn't pick up on that. So they took him home to get more money out of him, and then they split up. And so the kidnappee, if you will, says, "There's money in that drawer over there." And the criminal says, "Oh, okay, good." And he goes and looks over there. And the kidnappee is standing back here, and he goes, "Oh, well, now's my opportunity." Bam! Shoots a dude. His partner figured that the criminal had shot him. So now Tom Stewart just turns around and waits for that guy to come through the door. And the dude just comes prancing through because he figures that the poor victim is dead. Bam! Lets him have it too. So what he did was he surrendered temporarily until he had the option to make his move. You might search, you know. What do you do when you think there's somebody in your house? Most people are not going to call the police. You're going to search the house. Or you might just wait. How often have you heard a noise in your house or around your house, and it wakes you up, and you just sit there and say, "Well, I wonder what's happening about that. I'll just wait and gather more information." Sometimes we wait. And then there might be other things I haven't thought about. Learn to leave. Here, once again, this is, in my mind, a form of emotional hijacking where people get caught up in stand my ground. Anybody read my post about the duel at the dumpster? All right. Both of those people, or all three of them actually, that were involved in that, the guy who is dead would not be dead if he just said, "You know what? There's two guys with guns out here. I'm leaving." You know, that was a smart play. Similarly, the two guys with guns, what am I going to shoot some guy over a used mattress? Over a used mattress? You know, as I was reading this, and actually on my trip to Las Vegas, I went out and I looked at the place. I wanted to see what it looked like. I'm weird that way. That I like going to the sites of things and getting an idea of the physical layout. So I went out there and I was thinking, as soon as I saw it, I said, what my dad would have said, you know, if he'd been the fat old guy without the shirt, well, and the fat young guy without the shirt, but the fat old guy, the old man would have said, "Claude, let's take this mattress and we'll throw it over that fence into the commercial parking lot next door, and then I won't have to look at it anymore." That's what he would have said. I could just picture it immediately. You know, learn to leave, defuse the situation ahead of time. It helps to practice leaving. It helps to practice that. Here's how I practice this. When I'm in the grocery store parking lot, and I see one person starting to come up one aisle, or one row where the cars are, I go into the next one. That's all I have to do. I just change my direction a little bit, and I have left his path. Now, if he were to follow me around, at that point, what do I know? The jig is up. Or at least, now maybe he just realized, oh, my car's over there. It might be a harmless thing. But it kind of, okay, now I'm going to keep an eye on this guy more. But if he keeps on going, well, then there's nothing. Then he goes to his car, I go into Publix, and we have no conflict. So I practice that all the time. And I want to avoid getting sucked into undesirable situations. That's the most useful. How many of you know the Groucho walk from IDTA? That's the useful part of the Groucho walk. I see this guy and I go, and I just walk away from him. So personal protection. Once again, self-defense is just a subset of that. And I'd like for us to start thinking about it in a broader context. Store weapons. This is a personal fear of mine. I admit. I've gotten to the point I don't really like it when people send me stories about kids shooting themselves. But people do it, so I just aggregate the stories in my database. I have hundreds of them. I've been doing this for about 4 years now. And like I say, statistically, it's every day some kid shoots himself. So we want to store weapons so they are not accessible to unauthorized persons. Now, I've started to break that down into two categories. What I call protecting the weapon from the casually curious. When I was at the SHOT Show, I had a discussion with John Holsham, who's presenting here today, and I mentioned to him that my mission at the SHOT Show this year was to find devices that people could use to, at that time I was calling secure the weapon, and just like any little box or whatever that had a key lock on it or something like that. And so John was saying to me that when he was teaching private citizen classes, which he doesn't do that much anymore, he would tell people, don't buy a gun until you've got some way to secure it, even if all that is a metal toolbox from Sears and a lock. Now, that will not prevent the gun from getting stolen, but it will prevent a 2-year-old from getting at the gun and shooting themselves with it. Now there's a set of procedures that you have to develop to make that work. Like, I keep the key for the lock on my key ring, and when I go to bed at night, I unlock the lock on my toolbox, and in the morning, I lock it up and take the key with me. Something like that. That's just an idea of how to do it. But having some way to protect the gun from the casually curious. The good thing about that is those toolboxes cost $20. $20 investment keeps your kid from shooting himself. Now, does it keep some guy from breaking into your house and stealing it? No. But, once again, if we have our priorities, what's more important to you? Keeping your kid from shooting themselves with your gun, or making sure that some criminal doesn't use your gun in a crime? I don't have any children, but I'm pretty sure that if I had children, I would say my number one priority is keep my kid from shooting themselves with my gun. Because when that happens, that person will never have a decent night's sleep again in their life. Anybody know who Richard Manouzi is? Ring a bell? Yeah, there you go. Richard Manouzi was one of the FBI agents who was in the Miami massacre. He survived. He lives in Atlanta. One of my friends knows him. About 7 years he happened to be talking with Manouzi. And Manouzi told him, I had never slept a night through since that incident. Never once. You get traumatized by something like that, you will never sleep through a night again. He had to take cat naps at his desk. He'd be so tired. Okay, I'm awake now. Only sleep a couple hours a night. People whose children shoot themselves with their guns, I'm willing to bet the same thing is true. They'll never sleep another night again. Now, as opposed to securing the weapon from theft. Well, now we're talking about safes and strong rooms and things of that nature. It's a lot more money. It's a lot more effort. Especially for new gun owners, they're probably not going to do it. So when you're talking with someone, and all of you now who are right here, whether you understand it or not, you have become subject matter authorities on the concept of guns and personal protection to your friends. If one of them has never had a gun before, and they know you've been in this conference, they're going to come and ask you, what should I do? You're now a subject matter authority. So we've got to think about the fact that somebody who is just thinking about buying a gun is not necessarily going to invest hundreds of dollars and some of their floor space in their home to secure that gun from theft. They're not going to do it. Let's just accept that. But what we can say is, look, get some way to make sure the kid doesn't get a hold of the gun. And frankly, I don't think cable locks are the way to do it. The idea that somebody is going to, who doesn't carry a gun but has a gun at home, the idea that they're going to unload the gun every morning, put this cable lock to it, lock it up, come home at night, unlock the cable lock, reload the gun, and go through that rigmarole every day, that ain't going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So that's not the way to do it. We've got to have something for them to put a loaded gun into, even if it's just a toolbox from Sears with a lock on it, because then they can just put the lock, put the key in the lock, unlock it, and it's accessible at night. Pat Rogers said, your car is not a holster. Good Lord, I hate the number of incidents that I see of people who have guns in their cars that get stolen. Even worse, here's a pro tip. Is anybody here dating a gang member? No? Okay, well, I'll give you this pro tip anyway. If you are dating a gang member, you should, every time you get in your car, check the back seat to make sure that there is not a sawed-off shotgun in there that your kid can then get a hold of and shoot you in the back with while you're driving. True incident. Woman in California, dating gangbanger. Guy had gone out the night before in her car, left his shotgun in her car. Her kid was in the back seat, apparently unsecured, and got a hold of the guy's shotgun and shot her in the back through the car seat. And then obviously the car had a problem and the police had to come and all that weird stuff. But that doesn't just happen to gangbangers. There was a Second Amendment advocate lady who just had her pistol on the floor, yeah, that's a good place for it, of the car, and apparently it slid into the back seat. And one of her kids got a hold of it and shot her in the back through the car seat, through the seat of the car. And so she had to go to court. I can't remember the state that she was in, but that was a child endangerment charge for her. Florida. She had so then she had to go to court and got put on some kind of program or whatever because, and I don't, I have to say in that case, I don't blame the judge, for saying that. Look, you're an idiot. You left your gun where a kid could get a hold of it, and what would have happened if the kid shot her and then they got into a big accident, the car rolls over and everybody in the car gets killed? It's a problem. So your car is not a holster. So if we have to exercise a little bit of responsibility about this, that if you have friends who leave guns in their cars, you might have to, in a nice way, get across to them, you're an idiot. If you leave a gun in your car, you're an idiot. Prove me wrong. Sorry. You know, and as responsible gun owners, sometimes we might have to make those unpleasant conversations with people. It's not the way to do it. Let's get back to decision making. You have 3 inputs to good decision making. First of all, you have to know the rules. That's really important. The number of people who buy guns and don't have the slightest idea about the rules is stunning. Then you have to have some measure of adequate skill. Does that mean you have to be able to shoot like Dave White? Probably not. I would give you my definition of it, and many of my colleagues would be horrified at this. But if a person can consistently hit a sheet of paper at 12 feet, that's probably a good start in terms of the skill of shooting a gun. When they can achieve that, it's time to start thinking about the other aspects of decision making. Not to say that they don't want to continue to improve their skills, but that's the point where you start branching out. And then you have to understand the situation, and by situation I mean what you're working on right now, the robbery, or whatever the case may be. Unfortunately, we tend to focus on the fun part, have adequate skills. How many of you like to shoot? Yeah, that's one reason we're here. We like to shoot. We're shooters. Shooting is fun, and that's good. I was talking with my friend Annette last night about it. Is she here? No. There's an aspect of our lives when we do things just because they're fun, and shooting is, for some of us at least, is fun. And it's really easy for us to just focus on the fun part of this as opposed to the other parts. Know the rules. How many of you are not from the state of Louisiana? Just about everybody. How many of you looked at the Louisiana rules, the Louisiana code, for the use of force or violence or justifiable homicide, or I should say and justifiable homicide, before you came here? Okay, good. The rest of you did not. Don't you think it's a good idea that if you're carrying a deadly weapon, that you probably ought to know the rules where you are? At the very minimum, your homework when you leave here, once again, I'm a professor. Self-proclaimed, but I'm a professor, so you can't get out of my classroom without having some homework. The number of people that I teach in Georgia who have never looked at the Georgia code about the use of firearms and force and deadly force, and those are 2 different things. Force and deadly force are not the same thing. I am aware of no state that has one unified statute that combines force and deadly force. They're different. So your homework is to make, if you haven't looked at the codes in your state when you get home, you need to do that. There are other rules. What are your core values? How many of you have ever encountered somebody who said, I have a gun, but I could never shoot someone with it. Years ago, my roommate called me up and he said, I'll put my straight face on. Do you have any spare bullets? And I said, well, I might. Why do you ask? And he said, the story was that he was dating a woman, and she had two roommates in a house, and someone had attempted to break into her house that day during the daytime, and they were afraid. And they had a gun. The homeowner had a gun. But she had no bullets. And I was like, okay, describe the gun to me. And what she had was a pristine Model 36 3-inch Smith & Wesson revolver that she had had for 5 years with no bullets. And so I said, yes, I have some extra bullets. I will bring them over. So I took the 5 rounds and off I went. But I would say, and I'm theorizing about this, that when she bought that gun, she didn't really want to shoot anybody. She just wanted to have a gun. It was a talisman, as Paul Markle puts it. And then when the situation really got hairy, of some guy trying to get in, then she realized, maybe I should have some bullets. Well, there she had a confrontation of her core values of maybe the gun with no bullets ain't worth shit. And I need to reevaluate that. Other rules, safety rules. How many of you can recite any set of rules? I don't care whether it's the 4 rules that we use in the action sports, or the NRA rules, or the Glock rules. It doesn't matter. I don't think it's important to know which set of rules you use, as long as you recognize the fact that there are sets of rules. Pick one and know it implicitly, so that it's always part of your gun handling. Rules of the interview. John Farnham, once again, is the guy who came up with this idea of criminals interview us. They don't just run off and do a Tueler drill on us, in most cases. They interview us. And sometimes that interview, you don't even know what's going on. They're looking at you. And what you want to know is what are the rules of that interview and how do you fail it. That's what we want to do. We want to fail the interview. So the guy looks at me and says, yeah, that guy's an old gink, but there's something about him that's wrong. And I'm going to go find some girl in flip-flops instead. I'm sorry for the girl in flip-flops, but that's not my problem. Why? Because this is not a badge. This is not a badge. So the fact that that guy goes and finds a girl in flip-flops is not my problem. How many police officers have we got here? It's your problem. Not my problem. It's your problem. You are paid to enforce the law. I am merely tasked by my own sense of values to protect myself. That's as far as it goes. And the people that are important to me. The differences of criminals' rules as opposed to ours. How many of you have seen any of William April's lectures? The weird stuff that goes through people's minds that would never occur to nice people like us. And in that sense, I'll put myself in the nice people category because I don't go around victimizing people. So that, in contrast to criminals, that makes us nice people. But the weird stuff that goes in their minds, it's like, where did this come from? My friend Craig Douglas has this story about the guy with the curling iron deal. The criminal who went around robbing other drug dealers And the way he would torture them into giving them his stuff is he would stick a curling iron up their ass. This would never occur to me. Where did this idea come from? I can shoot somebody, no problem. I can visualize that. But sticking a curling iron up somebody's ass to make them talk? You know, I'm from Chicago. Use the phone book on the head instead. So that kind of weird stuff. It's important for us to understand that those people exist, and the way their minds work is completely different from ours. They have a different set of rules. You know, you'd go, what the hell are you doing? You're going to stick a curling iron on my ass? It would never occur to you that that's something that someone thinks about as a routine procedure. Routine. It's like nothing. That's what he did. He would walk into these guys' houses, tie them up, and he had a curling iron with him.
But was it plugged in?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Changes from your past. One of my colleagues in Atlanta had a client that he was teaching to do hand-to-gland combat with. And the guy had been beaten up 3 times. Not badly, but, you know, had been on the worst end it could be. And so my friend says, well, why didn't you just fight back? And the guy said, well, because when we were in school, we got in trouble for that. You're not in school anymore, dude. You know, things have changed. You know where this is really important is when you're teaching your kids or your grandkids. Because schools right now will tell them, if you fight with people, you're going to get in trouble. Well, you know what? As soon as that kid walks out of the school and someone tries to kidnap them, that rule should be going out the window. But you know what? Kids are young, they're impressionable, and unless you tell them, look, you're going to maybe get in trouble in school for fighting, and that's, you know, I'm not a parent, so I can't tell you how to handle that situation. But I can say that what you should tell them is, but if somebody tries to kidnap you, that you need to fight them. And you need to do everything you can to keep from being kidnapped. You know, and you may say that in school as well, I don't know. You know, one of my friends' daughter had 2 guys try to pull her into the boys' room. And her response was to punch one of them in the mouth and knock one of his teeth out. So the school calls him up and says, your daughter's being suspended for fighting. So he goes to school and they tell the story. And he says, hey, they were trying to pull her into the boys' room. What are you talking about? He said, well, we don't allow fighting in school. Well, you're full of shit. So we're going to go out and have ice cream and go to the park while she's suspended. You know, and he rewarded her for it. Now, I can't tell you, once again, what the appropriate thing is, but I can tell you that's an option. To say, look, if 2 guys are trying to pull you into the boys' room, I don't give a shit whether you're going to get suspended or not. You know, that's one of the options. In many cases, when I look at these things, I have to say, and you've all done this too, somebody around you will do something, and you go, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? And in many cases, the answer is not much. No, just being stupid. You know, it's the equivalent of, here, hold my beer. Have adequate skills. Adequate. I use that term very, words have meaning. Have some skills to be able to deal with the situation. You don't all have to be Gabe White. But you do have to have some idea of how to handle your tools and the situation, you know, even if it's just verbalizing. What's the response here? No. No way. You know, I don't. When your dog misbehaves, what do most of us say to the dog? No. I don't have any problem talking to a bum like a dog. You know, maybe that's because I'm not a nice person, but I don't care. You know, hey, you have a quarter? No. When I was coming back from Las Vegas in the Dallas bus terminal, some guy came up to me, and I'm sitting there, and he had slipped past the security guys. Greyhounds, I'll give Greyhound credit. They're pretty good about their security. There's not much problem in the terminals. You know, outside the terminal, it's a shithole. But inside the terminal was not too bad. This guy had slipped in, and I could just see him, and he comes over, and I'm like, yeah, this guy's going to put me up for money. You know? And so he sits there for about a minute. He's looking around. Really what it was, he's looking around to see if there's a security guy nearby. And he says, oh, I got money, you got any? No! I said it loud enough so the whole damn terminal hold it. No! And then what happened? Security guy comes over and kicks him out. You know? So, you know, sometimes you have to have that kind of skill. Observation. How many times do we see people? I know none of us do this. But how many times do we see people walking out of the grocery store and they got their head buried in their cell phone? That posture is a posture of submission and invitation to victimization. Our ability to verbalize, to just comprehend what's going on. And that goes back to those understanding that criminals have this weird stuff going in their heads that we wouldn't think about. Just our ability to move. I'm gone. You know, that helps a lot. Unarmed skills. Now, as we get older, we get more fragile. So we may need to think about what's appropriate to us. I'm 64 years old, I'm a little beat up. I'm not going to start picking up things that are jiu-jitsu. I'll admit it. I can't do it. You might have arm skills, which would consist of both less lethal and lethal skills. Now, lethal skills. Guns. About, I guess 3 years ago, there was a home invasion in Seattle. And unfortunately, the couple had taken some of that stupid advice about wasp spray. So that was a good idea. The guy breaks in, and he had his rape kit with him. And it was obvious that he was up to no good. And the dude sprays him with wasp spray. Guess what happened? Nothing. So then he gets into the husband gets into a struggle with the dude, and unfortunately the dude is winning, and the husband is a CrossFit instructor, just like the wife. And he's struggling with this guy, and he tells his wife, help me, I need help here. So BK means big knife. So the wife goes to the kitchen, and she was actually pretty deliberate about it. She talked about it in her interview with her, that at first she picked up some fish fillet knife, and she said, no, that's not big enough. So she put it down, and she picked up the biggest butcher knife she could find, and then proceeded to stab the guy to death. I believe the story said he was stabbed 12 times. She's just sitting there hacking on the dude while he's struggling with her husband. So lack of adequate tools on their part. Would you rather shoot somebody or have to stab them repeatedly with a butcher knife? Personally, I'd rather shoot. People who have never stabbed anybody don't understand just how ugly and nasty a situation that is. It is fun. Blood everywhere, it gets all over you, especially when it's a multiple deal like that. It's nasty. Better to shoot them. So you need to think about those skills. And if you haven't practiced with your tools, and I'm not going to embarrass anybody here, but that match that's being shot, that everybody has the opportunity to shoot, last year 186 people out of 300 shot it. 2/3 of the attendees shot it. The other 1/3 did not. That's practice. It's not a match, it's just practice. So if you haven't practiced with your tools recently, what you're going to have is the cognitive load of literally, how do I use this thing? How do I just make it go? Not how do I make it hit the target, but how do I make it go? How do I get the magazine in? How do I get the round in the chamber? Because people who don't practice frequently don't keep the round in the chamber. It's like, how do I do that? One of the classes that I teach back in Atlanta is based on the NRA's marksmanship qualification program. It's a pretty simple course. You have to shoot 5 shots into a 12-inch circle at 7 yards. 5 shots in 15 seconds. Everybody think that's simple? Want to guess how many people can do that on the first try? 1 out of 10. And these are not people that just bought a gun. These are people who have had guns and actually practiced with them.
What was the course required? 8 months?
Say that again?
What was the course required?
7 yards, 12-inch circle, 5 shots, 15 seconds. From a ready. Not from the holster. From a ready. 1 out of 10 will pass that. No, let me clarify that. The course of fire requires you to do it 4 times. Not necessarily in a row. But it's 100% standard. All 5 shots have to go into the 12-inch circle. And when I run it 4 times, 1 person out of 10 can do that consistently the first 4 times. Then, out of the 10, 4 more people will be able to do it with 1 more attempt. In other words, they get 4 out of 5. 4 more people will be able to do it in 2 more attempts. So in other words, 4 out of 6. And the last person will not get through it without extensive coaching. And that the class is not about extensive coaching. So now we'd all think that's a simple course of fire, wouldn't you? It's not. So even among people who the kicker of it is the 100% standard, because it's not unusual out of the 20 shots the people will put 18 into the circle, but the 2 go somewhere else. Now, I have to admit, I'm all about standards. I like a 100% standard, because if you think about it, what's a 70% standard? If we're going to look at that in terms of a ratio, I'll make sure I don't go over time. It's about 2/3.
Neighbors in your bullets. Bullets in your neighbor's house.
That's right, exactly. So that means if my neighbor encounters a home intruder and fires 6 shots at them, 2 of their rounds go into my house instead of the home intruder. I'm not too keen on that idea. So that's why I like 100% standards. So if you haven't practiced with your tools lately, then it's kind of a problem. Here's a promo. It's an opportunity for you for instant gratification. E-books by yours truly, the Tactical Professor. I have 2 of them. Concealed Carry Skills and Drills and Indoor Range Practice Session. I taught at an indoor range for years. And I recognize that a lot of people, that's all they have access to. I worked it out for Atlanta. I can't say for other cities. But in Atlanta, gun owners, 999 out of 1,000 of them only have access to an indoor range. That's literally the ratio. What I took the number of gun owners that were likely based on the population, and I divided it by the number of gun clubs that you could actually shoot at. Because most gun clubs in Atlanta are private facilities. You can't just say, well, I'd like to shoot here. Can I pay a fee? No, they're membership only. So most people only have access to indoor ranges. Well, indoor ranges are real restrictive. They don't let you draw. They don't, work. Can't shoot more than one shot every 2 seconds, stuff like that. So I devised a series of drills that will work at most indoor ranges. And then last year I came up with, I actually broke down a year's worth of incidents of people who actually did concealed carry. What were the skills that they had to do? And I made up a little report, and then I made a series of drills that emphasized those skills that they had to do. So, concealed carry skills and drills.com, indoor range practice sessions.com. Like I said, instant gratification. It downloads right away, and you'll have your thing right away. Understand the situation. Tom likes to talk about this. Give it. Who is around me and mine? One of the things that I find odd now is how often I see children away from their parents. I see that a lot. So now I've separated who is around me and who is around mine. And it's not necessarily kidnapping, but, like in grocery store parking lots, I see kids running around, and it's like, a couple times I almost hit them. It's like, hey, parents, what are you thinking? Not much. You let your kid run around in the parking lot. There's moving vehicles. Kids small, hard to see, especially at night. Concept of surveillance detection. And surveillance detection, there's two components to that. Now, if the FBI or the IRS or the National Security Agency is trying to keep tabs on you, your chances of evading that are pretty small. That's targeted surveillance against you. A woman who has a weirdo stalker, that is targeted surveillance against her. That is a very specialized topic of how you avoid that. As opposed to criminals surveilling a parking lot looking for likely victims. When I go into a parking lot, I don't go to the first available space. I drive around the parking lot looking for scumbags. It used to drive my girlfriends crazy. What are you doing? I'm looking for scumbags. I just tell them I'm looking for scumbags, and that's what I do. I drive around the parking lot. I'm looking for scumbags who are surveilling the parking lot, because that's what they do. I mean, it's Walmart parking lots. They're watering holes. There's a lot of crime goes on in Walmart parking lots, more than people realize. Well, I drive around, and if I see some shitbag or somebody who looks like a shitbag, I park on the other side of the lot from them. So, and then I also park next to a cart corral or one of those tree islands, because with my driver's side door, because I don't want anybody's car next to me. I tell people all the time, they killed Shuffleberger, but they didn't kill me. Lieutenant Commander Albert Shuffleberger, he was the naval attaché to El Salvador, and he was assassinated in 1983 because he let his surveillance detection down, and some guy walked up to him in his window and shot him with a .22 Magnum in the head. Of course, he was set up for everything, but nonetheless, that was his fault. He let his guard down. So this idea of keeping an eye on things, not necessarily targeted surveillance, but just what I call general surveillance. They're just looking for a victim. You know, guys hanging around. Process them. What are they doing and what is going on? A friend of mine likes to put it, what is wrong in my right world? You know, like one time I went back to my car and there's some guy standing there at the cart corral. Now, people don't hang around the cart corral. You know, it's weird. So I'm just looking at him and I got my hand on an noxious chemical. Like, hey, just hanging out? Yeah, okay. You know, and I just opened my car up and got into it and locked the door right away and drove off. So you look around for things that are just weird. And if they're weird, if you can, you avoid them. Position yourself and set yourself up for success. That's why I park where I do. I'm positioning myself for success. It's hard for people to get there without me seeing. Like Tom says, they don't just materialize from the Starship Enterprise. You know, they're coming down, they're somewhere, and they see you, you don't see them. And then understand the situation in the relation to the rules. I could not shoot the guy who was choking his chicken on the corner of Petrie and Ellis, but I could have sprayed him with a noxious chemical. Here's your inputs to bad decision making. Don't know the rules. Don't have any skills. Don't understand the situation. Make bad decisions. I mentioned before that I have my series of negative outcomes. These are the bad decisions. Shooting yourself. Everybody think that's a bad decision? How many times you go into a gun store and you see the people in the gun store pointing guns at their own hand? Or a gun show? Are those guns always loaded? Or, are those guns always unloaded? 999% of the time, they are. But, at least one case that I know of, a policeman in Kentucky goes in and he's looking at a .380, and he's pointing, that came out of the counter, he's pointing at his hand, boom, goes off, and shoots himself in the hand. Here's a problem. That if you shoot the left hand, your support hand, I'm right-handed, so I'll say it's my left hand. If you shoot your support hand with a high-velocity, high-performance, hollow point bullet, the chances that that hand will ever work right completely again are small. You'll probably, hand surgeons are pretty good, but Jose Canseco, minus that finger now. Shot his finger off while he was cleaning his gun. Shooting someone you shouldn't have, either intentionally or unintentionally. Unintentionally tends to be negligent discharges, go through the wall, or somebody standing next to you. Intentionally, our man Jerome Mason, Earthling. Oh, you don't look like you've been shot now. Bam, bam, bam. I think that was Bernie Getz's one, too, wasn't it? Yep. Getting needlessly arrested. Knowing the rules. If you're from Pennsylvania, don't drive into New Jersey while you have your gun in your car. If you're from Tennessee, don't go to New York City and want to see the Statue of Liberty, and when you see the metal detector there, go up to the policeman and say, "Officer, there's a metal detector there, I have a gun, what should I do?" And he says, "Okay, let me have your gun and put your hands behind your back because you're under arrest." And about $10,000 to $15,000, and 3 years later, they'll eventually dismiss the charges against you, but you'll have to go back several times and pay a lot of money and so forth. Don't do those things. Research the law ahead of time when you go to places. Getting shot by the police. Yeah, that's a problem. Not a real big problem, but once again, realize that we get emotionally hijacked by situations. When the police show up, if you call them saying someone is in your home, they're going to have a gun drawn. They don't know you from the other guy. So when they say, drop your gun, drop your gun. Because otherwise, they might just shoot you. And it does happen. Not that often, but it does happen. Once again, leaving guns where unauthorized persons can access them, resulting in tragedy. Frightening innocent people around you. I hope there's no one here that was involved in that open carry movement in Texas where they went into Chipotle with their AKs and M4s slung over their backs just to try and do something as a political statement. I will frankly say I think that's stupid. That's not the way we win friends. And then endangering innocent people needlessly, running around with your gun in your hand, or something as simple as, many times at two gun clubs I've been at, two gun clubs that I've been member at, people didn't have holsters for their guns. So they would walk around in the bay like this. And if you happen to be around them, they come over and want to talk to you. And I'd say, hey, don't point that gun at me. And the guy would say, I'm not pointing the gun at you. Look at it, it's pointing at my foot. Put that damn thing away. Get a holster. Well, he was endangering an innocent person. Needlessly, me. Strategy, tactics, and options. I hope I have not given you any answers here. Because that's not my option. That's not my option. My option here is to make you think. It is presumptuous of me as an instructor on a topic like this to give you answers. Because your strategy is going to be very personal to you based on your core values, what you think is important, what you're trying to accomplish. So what I've tried to do is give you some questions and things to think about. I can't give you reflexive responses because I'm not you. I'm a different person than you, a different situation than you. I want you to think for yourselves. You're all intelligent people. You're motivated. That's why you're here. It's like Tom said, there are only 2,000 to 3,000 people in this entire country who train consistently. You're in that group. What's here today is probably 10% of people in this country that train. And I applaud you for it. Think about that, you're doing a good thing, you're trying to be responsible people. So, as part of that, you're going to have to think about, what is all this stuff? What's my strategy? What are my options? And what tactics do I use to employ those options? Any questions about anything I've covered? Yeah.
Early on, you said there are 11 possible negative outcomes to using a gun, and you listed 7 of them there, I think. You said that marksmanship is only one of the, effectively only one of those negative outcomes. Can you elaborate on what those 11 negative outcomes are?
I tricked you. If you go to my website, you'll find that. Right, it's part of your homework. And that's true. That's true. And by the way, thank you for asking the question that I set you up to. I set somebody up to ask. I appreciate that. Any other questions? Great. Once again, practice your skills, concealed carry skills at drills.com or indoor range practice sessions. Instant gratification. Another question.
I want to make a shameless plug that if you use Facebook, you need to join the group 1,000 rounds of live fire or 1,000 rounds of dry fire.
1,000 days of dry fire.
1,000 days of dry fire. Because then you will be accountable to all the people in the public who are keeping track of it.
Thank you all for being here. That's great.